After working with a number of organizations and leadership teams, I've come to one painful realization that strategy never dies in planning. It almost always dies in execution. Hi, my name is Naveen Narayanan, MD at SSA Consulting Group. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the whole strategy planning and execution process and what pitfalls you should avoid in this journey of translating strategies into actions. Now, this is a long subject to cover in a single video, so I have broken it down into parts. In the first part, I will delve into the thought process that goes into creating meaningful strategies. In the next part, I will dive deeper into the whole gamut of things that you need to consider while executing strategies. So let's dive right in. Let's first start by understanding why strategy matters. Now, most organizations would believe that they are already doing okay and they don't need to implement new strategies. So Michael Porter demystified what strategy is all about. In his words, strategy is simply differentiating actions for an organization. Now, why does it matter? Today, the world is being disrupted at such a terrifying pace that most organizations, if they are fortunate enough to survive today, it is only because they haven't yet been disrupted. So therefore, it is not optional anymore to think strategically and to plan and execute strategies. It has become a survival need. Now is a good time to formulate strategies. So existence today does not mean immunity from tomorrow. There are enough examples of organizations that were doing very well, but suddenly they were disrupted by an external force that they did not see coming, and it fundamentally turned these organizations upside down. We have examples upon examples of the likes of Nokia, of BlackBerry, of Blockbuster Video. So disruption is inevitable. So strategy is just a continuous process, or rather a discipline of constantly looking for things that will disrupt us, and also how we can protect ourselves from those disruptive forces. So as Andrew Grove, the founder and chairman of Intel, famously said, that only the paranoid survive. So let's look at how do we go about formulating strategies. So the first thing we need to do is look at the environment and ecosystem we operate in, the dynamics of the industry, which direction the industry is going, where is the growth coming from, where the disruption is coming from, and so on. And look at the market forces overall and some of the key stakeholder voices, starting with the customer, understanding what matters to the customer, what are the customer buying patterns, what are the emerging trends, the alternate options that are in front of the customers, and so on. But we don't stop just with the customers. We also look at the other stakeholders we impact within our ecosystem. These include suppliers and partners, the regulatory institutions that regulate us, and the society at large. Here you can use tools like SWOT, PESTLE. There are a number of tools available. But what is important is for you to think holistically about your organization and remove the biases with which we look at our own organization. So once this is done, you'll get a fair sense of, one, where your organization's strengths lie. Two, you also see where your weaknesses and threats are, so that you can start thinking about where you need to protect yourself in order to prevent those threats overwhelming us because of our weaknesses. Moving on, we look at the purpose and direction of the organization. Most organizations, as they evolve with time, tend to lose sight of the very purpose of their existence. So it helps to bring back the team to the drawing board to ask the fundamental question as to why the organization exists. So the purpose or mission statement of the organization simply answers two questions. Why does the organization exist? And what problem do we solve? So to give you some famous examples, Walt Disney famously said, to bring happiness to millions, Disneyland will never be completed as long as there is imagination in this world. So there you see it. This is a purpose that can last generations, it can transcend centuries, and it will still remain meaningful. Moving on, we define the vision of the organization. So what is a vision? Vision, simply put, is where we see ourselves in the future. This could be a short-term future, it could be the next 3 to 5 years, or it could be a long-term future, 10 years and beyond. So vision simply answers the question, where do we want to go? So to give you a famous example again, this was a vision statement of NASA back in the 60s. Before the decade is out, that is by the year 1970, land a man on the moon and return him safely. So you can see the vision has an element of time by when we will achieve it, and it is an aspirational goal. What we want to achieve is clearly stated in the vision statement. Without purpose, the execution becomes noisy, and without vision, the efforts become scattered. So once we are clear about the purpose and vision of the organization, we can now start to think about the strategies. Of course, there are a number of books written on this subject, and you will find different versions or different interpretations of strategy. But I think no one put it as eloquently as Porter puts it. He simply says strategy is differentiating actions. So what are those differentiating actions? We need to have strategies that are very clearly focused, and it should define both what we will do and what we will not do. A famous example is that of IKEA. So IKEA lowered cost by redesigning the entire customer experience without cutting corners. Of course, there are a number of debates on this topic, but you cannot take away the fact that IKEA did not create a space for itself just by doing what others did. They fundamentally created a whole new category for themselves, where they stripped out the non-essential aspects of furniture delivery and focused on what mattered to the customer. Good quality products at cheap cost that can be quickly procured and assembled, and they carved their own niche. So in a nutshell, strategy is identifying what differentiating actions we will take in order to position ourselves in our own unique niche. The next step is to translate strategies into execution. Now we have spoken enough about what is strategy, but there are multiple layers to this, as you would have come to understand by now. I will talk about a few key aspects of strategy planning, and in future videos we will deep dive into each one of those aspects. The first aspect to consider is what we call as strategic themes. The strategic themes, simply put, are the areas of focus where we would like to get better at, or where we would like to differentiate ourselves on. Now there are different ways in which you can define strategic themes. I like to look at the balanced scorecard framework because it's a fairly holistic and also a simple to grasp framework around which you can identify your strategic themes. So the four pillars or four perspectives of the balanced scorecard are customer, process, financial, and people and capability. That is the things we would do to stand out in the eyes of the customer, the things we would do to have robust processes and repeatable excellence, the things that we would do to have financial prudence, and the things we would do to have solid people competency. And you can start building your strategies around these four key pillars. Next are objectives and goals, initiatives, measures of success, governance and ownership, and we will deep dive into these in future videos. But in a nutshell, what we need to grasp is that we should, starting with a very high level view of where we would like to go, translating that into which are the pillars on which we would like to focus our actions on. We now start to drill down into specific areas where we would like to move the needle on, establishing meaningful objectives, identifying the right KPIs and the right goals on those KPIs, and making sure we are taking the right initiatives that will eventually move the needle on the strategic areas that we would like to get better at. So in summary, strategy is not just what gets decided in the boardroom, it is also what gets consistently executed on the ground so that you are able to meaningfully impact the areas that matter for your organization. I hope you found this video interesting and insightful. I look forward to engaging with you in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for your attention.